I know that you are an anarchist. So how is it that you got to be, before we get into the other things that we kind of like briefly touched on, how is it that you became an anarchist?
Well, I guess the shorter version of it is that I became a libertarian from listening to well, I thought I was a libertarian. Let's say that from
Right.
listening to a radio show out of Atlanta called the Neil Bortz radio show, and he was on for many years down there, and he he was a libertarian, more like a big L libertarian. He used to do a bunch of I don't know if it was called Freedom Fest or it was something they did together with Sean Hannity.
Okay.
So that tells you what kind of
Right. Yeah. I was
libertarian he
going to
was.
say, got
But
it. Know that libertarian.
yeah, he was a former lawyer, and he actually wrote Do you remember the Fair Tax book?
Mm-hmm.
He wrote that. So that's the guy from that radio show.
Okay.
And what really got me interested was
that's not Eric Erickson, is it?
no,
No.
Neil Bortz.
Neil Bortz. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. He would talk about eminent domain a lot,
Right.
and I'd never heard of eminent domain. I was surprised that I'd never heard of it, and it really shocked me that our government could do that. And I was a Republican. I mean, I was really neo-conny, right? I should make a sock account called Neo-Conny, but so I was a big neocon, but I mean, I always had this love for freedom and the principles of freedom as I saw them at the time. And I really thought the Republican Party was leaving me because I was a Republican. And with George W. Bush and things like that, even though I liked him, the last time I voted was voting for him. And, you know, I realized that he wasn't a conservative. Like, I'm like, that guy's not a conservative.
Right.
But it was close enough. Like I liked him. So, you know, and we had to suspend free market principles, save the free market, all those things. Right.
I was just about to make that quote of
the mission was accomplished and all that.
Yeah. In order to save the free market, we had to suspend free market principles. Like,
yeah,
what?
that's one of my favorite.
That makes no sense, George.
Yeah, exactly. So there was all that. And so I was already sort of leaving Republicanism, but I didn't really know what I was. So I started listening to Neil Bortz. I thought, oh, I'm a libertarian. I get this. I'm, you know, pretty much socially liberal. I think people should be able to be left alone. And I'm definitely financial or fiscally conservative. So, you know, I thought libertarianism was this centrist sort of position between the two, the best of both worlds. And years later, I realized I was wrong, started reading more Ayn Rand. And then Jason Lewis is a radio show guy out of Minneapolis.
Okay.
And Tom Woods used to fill in for him.
Oh,
and
okay.
that is, yeah.
Right.
So that was really where my transformation to a real libertarian and a real anarchist really sped up was listening to Tom Woods. So that's how I became an anarchist.
Gotcha.
In the short version.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like I too was a neocon, and which not happy about it. You know, when the Iraq War started, I was like, hoorah. And that now I'm like, oh God, that was me at one point in my life. But, you know, much like the late Walter Jones, I have admitted I was wrong in that. But I was a neocon, and then I kind of found the Libertarian Party, and I was like, this sounds a lot more like me. And I know that when we were talking the other day, I told you that I'm not like, I'm getting like Spike, who is my co-host on Muddied Waters of Freedom. He is just pulling me with all of his might toward anarchy. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, I see your point there, but, and he's always got an answer that I can accept. And I'm like, all right, but what about, okay, got it. So like, I'm like, I still consider myself like a minarchist. I still consider myself like a minarchist, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, but yeah, this makes no sense either. So like, he's getting me there step by step by step, and not in an
I think
obnoxious way.
I think it's interesting when it's you're probably already there. It's just giving up the idea of the safety of government because we've been taught all our lives that the government takes care of us, right? And the government is provides safety nets for poor people and keeps, the Mongolian horde at bay and all those things, which honestly just isn't true. And the more you see it, the more you go, wow, I can let go of this. But I think also a lot of people get scared because they don't realize that with anarchy, especially libertarian anarchism, it's not lawlessness, right? There's common law, there's contract law. So that's one issue. And then it doesn't mean there will be no governance.
Right.
So just because there's not a state, which our government is rolled up into that in that violent and coercive state, that governance of, say, a city, which would be encompassed in the subsidiarity, which would be small competing governances, then I think a lot of people can accept that a little easier because really that's all it is about bottom up governance, starting with the individual, and then individuals can organize together into municipalities that would cover sewage issues and roads and things like that. So, we'd probably have zones where there is no government, and you'd have certainly places where there is governance. So,
And so what I was actually about to say is like, is that the way that I kind of see it is if a group of people, like, okay, so the city that I live in, which isn't St. Pete, but we'll call it St. Pete. So if the people of St. Pete were like, hey, we need, we should have some sort of board that handles all of this stuff. And then like, essentially they're just setting up their own government, but they would be voluntarily doing it. It's not like they're being forced into it. And that's kind of where I see my minarchism, which some people may say is anarchism. But
right.
like if other areas like Ocala, Florida, decided that they did not want any government whatsoever, any board looking over them, then they wouldn't have one. And
right.
I would be okay with either.
Yeah, and it's a matter of really the acceptance in society that it's not okay to force people to do things just because you want them. So if you want to organize with your neighborhood to, say, put in a new sewage system, but there are people who don't want to, well, you can't force them. So that would be the difference in a governance, a libertarian governance, than a government, a state that would, states are usually generally much bigger and centralized, but these would be non-centralized. And even if you did have some governments where, because they could make a, law, we don't want, speeding and the speed limit's going to be 55 or whatever. They could do that, but you don't have to go there. You don't have to live there. There's plenty of places. So right now we don't have any competition of governments.
Right.
You have some of that within states, but the federal government has become such an overbearing taskmaster on the states that they really can't do the things that might represent their citizens of that state a little better. But, I remember years ago, Louisiana tried to lower the drinking age. And
this was
said,
Reagan era, right?
I think so. But the Fed said, nope, can't do it. We're going to take all your money for highways if you do that. Right. So the states have become reliant on federal government money, which they have no money. It's all stolen from us. So it's a system that perpetuates itself.
Right.
Hey, everybody. If you liked what you just saw, be sure to subscribe to Muddied Waters Media by pressing the subscribe button just below me or pressing the little badge right here. It should be right here. You press that badge, you press subscribe, and then you press the bell to get notifications to your phone every time that Muddied Waters Media puts everything out, which is at least once a day.
Yeah.